Hey guys, I just wanted to create a brief tutorial to show you a really neat trick that you can do with Catalyst and Dynamic to make your site fully fluid. I'm not talking about just responsive, but actually fully fluid. So instead of being, maybe stuck inside a 960 wide wrap area, it actually juts out or sticks out all the way to the left and right side of your browser, no matter what the width is, making it fully fluid. So we're talking fully fluid and fully responsive. So it still responds and still looks great on tablets and mobile devices and stuff like that. So first of all, I was going to a little background on this. I've actually been asked several times in the past, how is it possible to do make Catalyst sites fully fluid and kind of like, for example, people you always use Amazon.com as an example of a fully fluid website design. And I would always say, yes, you can, but it takes a bunch of custom CSS and it can cause, some issues, et cetera, et cetera. Or just, it might not be worth it, messing with that. But ever since I added the responsive design options, I've always thought, well, the responsive design options set everything kind of fluid and the percentage widths and stuff like that with a lot of things. And I was like, if it just wouldn't stick at that first media query point, that first trigger point of 960 or whatever you have it set at, if it could just keep going and just get wider and wider with the browser, then hey, there you go. But I never thought much of it until I was working on a demo site for Catalyst that required fully fluid layout, or at least it was something I wanted to accomplish with it. So I really started thinking about it. And next thing I know, within a few minutes I had it done, and it was just it was kind of a little slight hack, but not really. Seemed like a pretty solid solution, and it's something using the widths and the responsive design options in Catalyst, and it worked really well. So that's what I wanted to show you, and I'll walk you through the steps now. Okay, so as you can see, well, actually, before we do anything else, I reset all the Catalyst and dynamic options just to kind of start from scratch for you. So you'll need to go into the core options and go to content and activate the responsive design options in dynamic. Before we move forward, and then I'm going to jump over to the dynamic options. And as you can see, if you refresh and then you can shrink here, you can see now it's fully responsive, but now it's a matter of making it fluid. Okay, so first things first, we're going to jump over in the dynamic options. We're going to go to widths. And if you have a bunch of custom layouts, you're going to want those to kind of match up with your default layout in terms of the wrap width here or whatever. But I'm just working on the default layout, so I'm just going to change the content width to 3,000 pixels. All right, so that leaves you with a wrap width of 3,520 pixels. Now you can set this to whatever you want, but the idea, it could be 2,000, 2,500, whatever. The idea is to make it wide enough so it can account for any wide browser, to keep it stuck to the outer sides of the browser no matter what the width. All right, so I'm setting it to 3,000, and then this content area is going to stretch and contrast and everything, or contract or whatever based on the width of the browser, whereas the sidebars are kind of generally stick to their static width for the most part. So I'm going to save changes here and refresh. Now as you can see, your site is fully fluid and stuck to the sides of the browser. I'm going to shrink it a little bit here, and as you can see, it's still fully responsive as well, and now it's fully fluid. Now if I just left it at that, I mean technically that would work, but that's not really where most people are going to want to be. As you can see, you've got the centered title area, the centered nav bar, your footer is centered, and your content area is full width, and your sidebars are sitting here below the content area. Okay, so that's basically acting like, because technically it did trigger that first trigger point, or it's inside that first trigger point, so now it's responding. It's using those responsive styles. And that's fine in the default way of doing things at 960 or whatever, but at this basically fully fluid width, that is generally not ideal. So let's go ahead and work one chunk at a time, and I'm going to show you how to undo some of these things and make it work the way you would expect it to. Okay, so first things first, let's address the content area. I want my sidebars to sit beside the content area. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the dynamic options. We're going to click on the responsive tab and click on show hide options. And down here in the default media query options, you've got the different sections. You've got the wrap, the header, navbar, content sidebar, easy widget areas, and footer. And they're all set to default, which means they're all utilizing those default media query styles that I added for responsive design. And you can set them all to none if you like, which means you basically turn them off and you kind of hand the keys over to the end user, the designer, to add them in manually. But what I'm going to do here is first focus on the content sidebar media query styles, and I'm going to set this to progressive. This is a feature I added to make it so your sidebars kind of stick around a little bit longer till that second trigger point, and then they drop below the content area, as opposed to the default where they just drop immediately. And so we'll set that to progressive, and now if you refresh, you can see now they're sitting next to your content area. Now, one little side note, if you were using a single right or single left sidebar, it would do just this: single right sidebar, single left sidebar. If you're doing a double left or double right, it's going to also do this, where you have a single right or single left sidebar, because the progressive option, the way it works, is once you hit that first trigger point, it does keep your sidebar next to your content area, but it also drops sidebar 2 below sidebar 1, so it acts as a single sidebar at that point. So just to mention that. Okay, so as you can see though, now it's still fully fluid, and it's also still fully responsive. Once it hits that second trigger point, it then does drop below your content area. But now it actually acts more like a typical website, sitting next to your content otherwise. So let's jump on the title area and the navbar as well. So what we're going to do is, for the header and the navbar, we're going to set these styles to none. Alright, so we're basically just turning off those defaults. And then if you reload, now you can see that they're left aligned, which is what you would expect. And the problem, though, is they are no longer responsive. Now, in some cases, that might be fine that they're left aligned, but if you want them to act like they do by default and actually center once you kind of hit that trigger point, we're going to make a little tweak. And the way this is going to work is, basically we're going to take those default media query styles that we've turned off, and we're going to manually add them into specific media query boxes down here. So we're basically just taking manual control over those default styles. Now, the way we're going to do that, as you can see, we've already turned them off, so now we just need to grab them. And what I did when I added these responsive design options, is I actually put those defaults in the tooltips of the different sections. So if you click the tooltip for the header section, you'll see here's the default code for the first trigger point here. I'm going to select all and copy. And now I'm going to place these, because by default they're here. Basically they affect every single one of those trigger points. I'm going to make it so they affect all but that first trigger point. So that's going to be the fourth box. And I'm going to paste that in. As you can see, this is max width of 767 pixels, which means once you hit that second trigger point of 767, then it goes ahead and does the centering of the title area. So I'm going to save my changes, refresh. Now, as you can see, it's still sitting left, which is what we'd expect. But once you hit that second trigger point, it then centers as the responsive defaults would do. So now we just need to do the same thing for the navbar, and actually I'm going to knock out the footer as well, because if you look here, the footer is centered at this point. So what I want that to act normal and then center at that trigger point. So we're going to go, let's go ahead and go to the footer. I'm going to turn these to none, and then I'm going to go to the navbar and grab the defaults. So let's go to default code, copy that, and I'm going to paste that into that same fourth box, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the footer. I'm going to grab that code and paste it into this box and save changes. And now if you reload, you'll see that your footer is now acting normal. It's not centering. But if you shrink it down, here, actually let me show you the navbar. If you shrink it down, now the navbar is centering with the title area, and the footer is centering as well at that second trigger point. All right, so at this point we've pretty much got everything acting as it should and kind of how you would expect. Now, let me first jump into one more thing about the Easy Static Homepage if you're using that, and then I'm going to just show you a few little tips, and then we'll finish this up. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the Easy section or the Easy tab, and I'm going to click on Static Homepage. And if you reload, now if you'll see here, the once again, because we're technically in that first trigger point, the Easy Static Homepage widget areas or the Easy widget areas are acting as if they're responding to that responsive design, and they're basically they're fully or they're set to a full width. So they're still responsive, but they're not sitting side by side. So to fix that, we're going to go to the responsive tab. We're going to go to Easy, the Easy Media Query styles, and we're going to set this to delayed. And delayed is pretty much the same thing as progressive for the content. And the reason it's called delayed is because it basically delays the point at which they drop below each other and go full width. So if you reload, you'll see now they're sitting next to each other, but they actually they do change width. They shrink as you shrink the browser, but then once they hit that second trigger point, they drop below each other. So they still act responsive, but just not until these guys trigger that second trigger point. Everything centers, everything drops below, and everything like that. All right, so all we did there is just set that to delayed. Okay. Now, I wanted to jump on two different things. First, let's jump on the nav bar here. There's a few little things unique about the nav bar that I want to point out. Okay, so let's say you wanted to use a drop-down menu for the nav bar, and with this particular setup that we have here. So let's start with the tablet drop-down. First of all, if you want to do the drop-down, you have to select one of the drop-down options. If you don't select it, then the actual physical drop-down menu is not activated and it won't be available. So let's select tablet drop-down, save our changes, and now if you reload, you'll see there's the drop-down menu. Now the problem with this, once again, is it's happening from the get-go instead of waiting until we shrink the browser. And so that's the same thing, it's because of the way we're doing this fully fluid thing. So if we don't want this, there's a little trick that I figured out, and I want to share how you do that here. So now that we selected tablet drop-down, I'm going to click on the tooltip for the navbar section, and I'm going to go down, I'm going to scroll down until I find the tablet drop-down info. And here you've got the tablet drop-down code, and I'm going to copy that. Okay, now I'm going to go up here, and I'm actually going to go to that first, or it's the second media query box, but it's basically code that only affects that first trigger point. And I'm going to paste this in, and this may seem a little confusing to some, may not for others, but if it is, just do it and it'll work, so don't worry about it. But I'm going to explain it anyway. By default, what this default code does is basically says, hey, default navbar wrap, go ahead and display none, basically disappear. And then, hey, drop down div or drop down menu div display block, which means actually make yourself visible. And so I'm going to switch this, because what I want in this case is I'm saying in this first trigger point, I want to display block or actually display the default navbar, and then I'm going to display none the drop-down navbar. So I just basically switched those styles. Now if you refresh, you can see the navbar is the default navbar is back in there, and then but like I said, you remember how I put it in the box that only affects that first trigger point. So once we hit that second trigger point, it should go back to the way it was, which means it should go to a drop-down menu. So as you can see, once we hit that second trigger point, the drop-down menu is back in there, everything's centered and everything. But if you pull out, as you can see, the default menu is there. Okay, so that's a real simple solution for the tablet drop-down. Now, what about the mobile drop-down? Well, in the case of the mobile drop-down, we're going to leave tablet drop-down selected. That's what we're going to use for either one of these in this particular scenario. The difference, though, is we're going to move this code. So we're going to, the code we just pasted into that second box, we're going to copy it, and we're going to paste it into the third box, which means it affects all but that mobile browser or mobile width or whatever. And we're going to paste it in, save changes. Now, if you reload, you still have the, there's the default nav bar. Now, when it hits the second trigger point, it centers like it does by default. But then when it hits the third mobile trigger point, as you can see, then it turns into the mobile drop down. Okay, so that is a simple solution for that. It works really well, and it kind of covers that base. So that pretty much covers all the things that I had tested and tried out. It works really well. Oh wait, I'm sorry, wasn't quite finished. I was gonna say it works really well, and I'm really pleased with with it. Like I said, there's some things you could see slight hacks, like the whole width thing, but it all just works. It works really well, as if I designed it just for this purpose. So it was kind of, like I said, it's kind of like a happy accident on The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross. So I don't know if you ever watched that show, but the point is, it just worked out, and it was a pleasant surprise. So I wanted to share that with you. But before I finish up here, let me actually do one more thing, and that is, in some cases, you might want some padding or margin on either side of your wrap area, even when it's fully fluid like this. So in other words, you might want some breathing room. Some websites will have that little bit of breathing room. So let me show you how to do that with this fluid design. I'm going to go to Advanced Options, Custom CSS. I'm going to activate the front-end CSS Builder, and I'm going to actually activate the editor-only version. Save changes and reload. Now you can see there's the Show Hide CSS Builder. Now I just have the front-end CSS Builder here, and I'm just going to do a simple pound wrap, which means ID of wrap, and then open and close brackets, and I'm just going to set the margin to 0.40. Done. Okay, so now basically I'm saying, top and bottom margins are 0, but left and right are 40 pixels. And I'm going to change the background color so you can see it a little better, but there's a really light gray right here. But basically you've got 40 pixels on either side. Let me save changes here. And actually, like I said, let me just go to the dynamic options and darken the background here so you can see this better. But okay, so now as you can see, here's those margins I added. So the cool thing is it's still fully fluid. See, it's still sticking to the browser, but it just gives you some breathing room right there. Okay, so that was just a simple custom CSS addition. And then the last thing I was going to mention is, what about once you hit the tablet and the mobile phone and stuff, you're probably going to want to get rid of that extra space because you want to take full advantage of every pixel of width in those smaller browsers. All we have to do to address this is go to the Responsive Design tab in Dynamic Options, and we can then go to this. Let's see here. Let's go to the fourth. I'm going to go to that same fourth trigger point here, fourth media query box. And I'm actually, I like to add my CSS kind of top down. So top elements and then lower elements, middle and lower elements. So here you've got header, nav bar, footer. So I'm going to actually put the wrap at the top. It doesn't matter. You don't have to. You could add it however you like, but that's just, I'm explaining why I'm doing that. So anyway, I'm just going to add a wrap with a margin of 0. So all I'm saying is, once you bypass that first trigger point and you jump to the last three, or the last three little things, basically once you hit that second trigger point, then go ahead and get rid of those side margins. So save my changes, refresh. Okay, so as you can see, we still have those side margins and they're still fully fluid, but once you hit that second trigger point, they disappear. So, and then you're taking full advantage of all the different of the smaller browser sizes and stuff. So, okay, now I can wrap things up. So that's pretty much it. That's the basics of it. There's a bunch of other, with the demo site I mentioned, I added a bunch of other, CSS just to kind of tweak things to my own liking. But those are more like site-specific ones. I wanted to kind of give you the general overview of it. So I'll go ahead and post this. I'll probably go ahead and paste in the actual styles I used, though I would probably suggest doing it the way I did it by copying and pasting from the boxes. But I might give some examples or whatever to make it easier. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you found this this video useful.